District Court. So first, I will introduce my fellow counselors. I have Counselor Terry Kennedy with us in the State House, Counselor Ianella.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, Counselor Ianella. Good to see you. I see Counselor Jubenville. And
The rest will be joining.
the rest will be joining shortly. And first, I will read a letter from the governor into the record. Dear counselors, I am pleased to nominate Carol Vittorioso to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Fitchburg District Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I am enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker. And with that, we'll begin with your witnesses. So I'm not sure who you'd like to call first.
Sure. So speaking on my behalf today is First Justice of the Fitchburg District Court, Christopher P. Locanto. And then second will be Chief of Probation, Rebecca Ramirez Abdullah. I feel they know me best in my role as their teammate and as acting Clerk Magistrate of the Fitchburg District Court. So
Marvelous.
I'll ask First Justice Christopher Locanto.
Welcome, Justice. And before I begin, I just want to introduce my counselor colleague, Counselor Devaney.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, council members, and thank you, Carol, for allowing me to speak on your behalf. It's truly an honor. The truth is that I could go on for an hour about Carol's competence, her integrity, her leadership, her dedication, her friendship, and how she's demonstrated all of those things in the time that I've known her and the time that she's been at the Fitchburg District Court. So I first met Carol about 25 years ago. When we first met, she was a bar advocate in the Leominster District Court, and I was an assistant district attorney. And I can tell you that her dedication and zealous representation of all of our clients still stand out in my mind to this day. She brings a lifetime of experience to the position of Clerk Magistrate. I've gotten close to her in the last 2 years. When she first came to the Fitchburg District Court, she was like a sponge, soaking up and learning all that she could about the job, the staff, and the court. She quickly became part of the Fitchburg District Court family. I think the best judge of her ability is seeing how someone operates during a crisis and during the pandemic. And it's a good window into her character and her integrity. She was named acting clerk in February of 2020 when Brian DeAndrea got nominated and confirmed for the Worcester District Court. Obviously, she had big shoes to fill, which she's done admirably. Within the first 5 weeks of being on the job, the world changed with COVID. We shut down. There was uncertainty. The staff was concerned about their health and safety, and we weren't really sure what was going to happen next. I can tell you that she's been a rock. She's been a source of comfort and leadership to her staff, the bar, the public, and the entire court. She's been a boss, a coach, and a cheerleader throughout the pandemic. She has transitioned the clerk's office to accommodate COVID. She has reached out to the bar and the members of the public to keep everyone informed of what was happening and been helpful to making sure that everyone stays healthy and safe and that the work is getting done. During the time of the pandemic, and we're still going on, we met as a leadership team every day with the pandemic. And in a word, she's been amazing. We start and end every day together, trying to make Fitchburg District Court the best that it can. I can tell you personally that her friendship has been invaluable to me during the past 2 years. She's like a big sister, great friend, and legal scholar all rolled into one. I'm proud to serve with her, and I'm hoping that the committee votes favorably on her nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. If any counselors have questions or comments, Counselor Kennedy.
Judge, you're doing a great job out there.
Thank you.
One of the things that happens, at least with the members of the council that go into court frequently, is we get a lot of complaints about judges that we might have voted on that people might not like. The only thing I hear about you is praise, period.
Thank
From-
you.
From every sector. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Counselor De-
Paul, may I
Counselor
say
Devani?
something to the judge?
Oh, sorry, we'll go Counselor Devaney and then Counselor Jubinville.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Oh, my goodness, 7 years. And you look great. You haven't changed.
Thank you.
So you must like the job. Now, I'm hearing great things about you, and you were one of my proudest votes, really. And that's such an honor for this nominee to have you come. So what quality do you think of when you think of this nominee, what she will bring to the bench?
So, integrity, and in all aspects of both her personal and her professional life. I've known her husband for a number of years. She's a proud mom and loves to talk about her daughter, who's a freshman down in Washington, D.C., and how proud she is of that. She's an amazing example for her daughter. Frankly, she's an amazing example to all of the people in the courthouse, and everyone that deals with her has a tremendously positive experience, and she really is a role model for everyone in the court.
Well, your testimony means a lot to me, and I want to thank you for coming in person. I like to look people in the eye and not in Zoom, and they're unmuted and muted and all of that. So thank you for taking the time. It's pretty safe in here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Counselor. And Counselor Jubinville, did you have a question?
No question. I just wanted to thank the judge for what a great job you're doing. I reiterate what Councilor Kennedy had to say. I can't wait to see you when I'm out there someday. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments? No? Well, with that, thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming this morning. Your testimony means a lot.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And with that, we'll call Chief Probation Officer of the Fitchburg District Court, Rebecca Ramirez Abdal.
Good morning, members of the council. Thank you for having me here today. It is truly an honor to be here to speak on behalf of my colleague and friend, Carol Vittorioso, for the appointment of Clerk Magistrate in the Fitchburg District Court. In my 20 years of experience in probation, especially within the last 4 years as chief, I have learned how critical it is that the first justice, clerk magistrate, and chief probation officer have a good working relationship. In Fitchburg, we do. I first met Carol when she joined us in Fitchburg as assistant clerk, and she hit the ground running. Carol's impact was felt right away as she developed relationships with her team, other departments, litigants, local police, and members of the public. It came as no surprise when Carol was named acting clerk magistrate. However, no one would ever have imagined the challenges we would face, as within weeks of her appointment, we were thrust into the COVID pandemic. And under normal course, Fitchburg District Court is a very busy court. Carol now finds herself in a new role as department head without any assistant clerks, managing the daily challenges of moving a robust case flow and adapting to the complex logistics surrounding the pandemic. It is during difficult times like these when true leaders rise, and Carol has risen to the occasion again and again. Oftentimes when confronted with challenges, and this happens quite a bit during the pandemic, we as department heads have had to collaborate to solve issues. Carol's the one who listens, analyzes the situation from different angles, and is forward-thinking in her ability to problem solve. Carol shows grace under pressure. I've also witnessed Carol managing skills at firsthand. I've observed her to earn the respect of her staff while boosting morale during these difficult times. Carol rolls up her sleeves, works alongside her team, often the last to leave at the end of the day, and treats everybody in the courthouse with dignity and respect. And perhaps more importantly, I've observed Carol as a person. Carol is devoted to her family, her husband, Sean, proud mother of her daughter, Grace. She's well-rounded and gives back to her community. To give an example of the kind of person she is, as you may know, 5 years ago, Carol and her family suffered the tragic loss of her cousin, Vanessa. And out of this tragic event, Carol co-founded the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation, partnering with a number of organizations that provide educational and safety awareness programs that help reduce violence against women. In conclusion, members of the council, you have a woman before you that has not only shown she is capable, but has shown great strength in the face of unprecedented times. I ask that you ensure the Fitchburg District Court continue to thrive by confirming that Carol remain permanently as our Clerk Magistrate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Counselor Devine?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Counselor.
So, how many probation officers do you have there?
I have 6 probation officers, 2 associate probation officers, and 4 support staff.
Wow, that's good. I can remember a few years ago, I visited a district court, and I went into the probation office, all empty desks with the probation, the chief probation officer. And so you're getting funded.
We are.
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
fortunate.
No, that's
to
a
have
big
staff that I
problem
have.
because that's like the bottom of the ladder here for the, for that, I think it's like 1.5% or something judicial gets. But anyway, so do you see the nominee every day or how often do you say?
Every day.
Wow.
As Judge Lecanto mentioned, we usually begin our day and end our day with some sort of interaction.
Okay, so you see her under stress or when you're busy and so
Absolutely.
forth. So what would you say about her demeanor?
I would say she handles stress with grace. She's calm. She's sort of, she's very rational in her thinking. And I oftentimes, even after work or on weekends, things will come up, especially with the pandemic. And, she's someone that I can confide in and I can call and we sort of bounce things off of one another. And I like doing that with Carol because she tends to just sort of listen, look at things from different, perspectives. And then between the two of us, we sort of, figure out the
Well,
best
that's great.
outcome.
Well, thank you for what you do and thank you for coming in person. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments or questions from the council?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your testimony. And now I'll ask if there's anyone here to speak in opposition to the nominee, and there being none.
I won't let him in anyway.
Would you like to first introduce any guests or family you have?
Yes,
And then I
thank-
understand you have a statement prepared to offer.
And we do. Thank you, Councilor DePalo. Good morning, everyone. Here in support, and on my behalf is my husband, Attorney Sean J. Gallagher, who has been, and as always, supportive and frankly, the greatest person in my life. Those who couldn't be here, if I could just, if you could indulge me so I can name them, my former bosses, current mentors, and forever friends, Brian DeAndrea, the clerk of the Clerk Magistrate of the Worcester District Court, and the Honorable Patrick J. Malone, who's now, I don't know, like he's always going somewhere, New Bedford or Plymouth right now. They've been great trainers for me. I'm hoping she's watching or will be watching later. Our daughter, Grace Gallagher, who could not be here, and hopefully watching from her residence hall at American University in Washington, D.C., where she's a Dean's List freshman in the School of Communications. Sean and I are extremely proud of her, and she's enjoying her time. I'd also like to acknowledge my brother, Alessandro Vittorioso, who encouraged me to attend law school, is watching because I frankly encouraged him not to attend today. And his wife, Lynn Vittorioso, is also watching, who has always been more of a sister to me than an in-law. And my nephews, Stephen, Matthew, Michael, and Andrew Vittorioso, my brother's 4 sons, whom I absolutely adore. I have great thanks for Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito for having the faith and confidence in me to continue to carry out the role of Clerk Magistrate in the Fitchburg District Court and to execute the mission of the trial court. To Chief Legal Counsel Robert Ross and Executive Director of the JNC Lauren Green Petrino, thank you for your hard work. And finally, thank you to all of you governor's counselors, Councilor DePalo, my representative for District 7, Councilor Devaney, Councilor Duff, Councilor Ferrera, Councilor Hurley, Councilor Ionella, Councilor Jubinville, and Councilor Kennedy for allowing me this opportunity to answer your questions. Those were in alphabetical order, not in order of preference, Councilor Kennedy.
Used to being last.
The best is last. So I'll start by saying this adage, the broom doesn't speak English. That admittedly odd but wise phrase has guided me from my early days as a practicing lawyer in various courtrooms around Worcester County to where I am now, serving as acting clerk magistrate of the Fitchburg District Court, hoping to earn your approval for this awesome opportunity to become the clerk magistrate. To understand that phrase and how it has inspired me, I'd like to explain a few things. First, my father said it upon his termination from his job as a janitor because he did not speak English. Second, the story does not end there. My father went on to co-own and operate the largest independent corrugated packaging manufacturer in New England for more than 40 years, employing more than 150 people throughout central Massachusetts. And third, that nuanced phrase encompasses for me the overarching views that my hardworking parents instilled in me, the keys to success. Treat others with respect and work hard at something you love. My father and mother were born in the same small town in central Italy. As a young man, my father joined the Italian Navy, set to forge his own path. My mother, too, at the young age of 16, emigrated to the United States to live with a father she had never met. These initial journeys of courage and vision were reminders to me that great rewards always follow great risks. My parents reconnected here in the United States in 1950 while my father was on leave. They reunited and courted in Dedham, Massachusetts, different paths leading to the same destination. My father started his post-naval career as a floor sweeper at Allied Container, a manufacturer of corrugated boxes. He was terminated because he did not speak English, and he often told my brother and me that he thought that was a funny reason to get fired because all he did was sweep floors and, quote, the broom doesn't speak English. The stumbling block did not deter him. My father had determination and grit. Only 7 years later, he co-founded and co-owned Star Container Corporation in Leominster, Massachusetts. I worked in the factory every summer while I was in high school and college, and being the boss's daughter brought me no perks. I was on the factory floor and eventually worked my way up to the office the summer before my sophomore year in college. All the while, at each position, I observed my father interact with his staff, his employees, and his customers. He treated everyone with respect and sought their opinion. He listened carefully and spoke honestly. He had a great sense of humor, which he shared with his coworkers, who in turn shared it with him, garnering a great mutual respect. He loved his job, and it was obvious. My mother also worked with my father as one of his first employees, in fact. Despite working long days, she found the time and patience to encourage me to cook, excel in school, and to make my bed each morning because it would be the first of many daily accomplishments. So how do the children of these two people top that? They don't. But my brother and I learned from them that discipline and hard work were essential for fulfilling life. My father was constantly telling us, don't try, do it. So we did. My brother successfully followed my father in business, and with my family's encouragement, I went on to law school, which I thought would be the greatest experience of my life until I actually practiced law, and then until I actually started my next career in the trial court as an assistant clerk and then acting clerk in the Fitchburg District Court. I loved the practice of law. Those early lessons my father taught me brought me success as a lawyer. I listened to my clients, always treating them with respect and empathy. I solicited opinions and advice from colleagues, also working to mentor others along the way. I knew that every person in whichever courthouse I entered, from the judge to the clerical staff, to the other lawyers, the clients, the court officers, and yes, especially the janitors, all deserved my respect, which I demonstrated to them daily. And because I practice law in this manner, I loved going to work every day. After 28 years, I decided to make a transition and serve the community in which I grew up and was educated. I wanted the opportunity to make more of a difference in the lives of others, and working at the courthouse with all the people I had grown to love and admire during my years of practice seemed the next logical step. I enjoy everything about being a clerk magistrate. It may be as simple as greeting litigants at the counter and asking how I can help. It may involve assisting someone with an application for protective order or connecting them with a safe plan advocate who can guide them through the process. Perhaps it is leading an attorney in the right direction who is not familiar with our court, or serving local attorneys by getting them in and out quickly so they can appear in other courts and meet with clients. I remember that many of those whom I may meet do not understand why they are here or what they should do. People for whom coming to court is scary and foreign and overwhelming. My job is to put them at ease and help them, which I do with patience, a smile, and an encouraging word. And just as my dad and his employees enjoyed a mutual respect for each other, the Fitchburg District Court staff and I share that same collegiality. The most rewarding part of the job is helping people who find themselves before the court due to a momentary lapse of judgment. As a clerk, I have the amazing opportunity to help those who may have made a mistake to understand the consequences of their actions, yet simultaneously show them compassion and offer them a second chance. I also have the incredible responsibility to assure public safety by issuing complaints and search warrants where there is probable cause to do so. I want to become the Fitchburg District Court Clerk Magistrate to continue to help people resolve legal issues, both large and small, give them the opportunity to be heard, and to keep the community safe. And to do all these things with these same values in mind, respect everyone from all walks of life and under all circumstances, to serve the public and my community, and to show everyone how much I love this job. My father often reminded my brother and me of his adage, "The broom doesn't speak English." That means so much more than you don't need to speak the language to contribute to your community and make a life for yourself. It means to be empathetic, to be considerate of others, and to give everyone a chance. This is the mission of the trial court, that all users of the trial court are unfailingly treated with dignity and respect. That is my mission as a clerk magistrate, if you allow me the privilege of this job. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And we will move to the council for questions, and I'm going to open with Councilor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me get this thing hooked up here. Can you hear me, Carol?
Yes, Counselor.
Okay. I like your father, even though I've never met him. Let me ask you a question. What do you think our role here is as governor's counselors?
I think your role as governor's counselors is to give the advice and consent to the governor and lieutenant governor, and to interview their nominee and to determine whether or not that nominee is the best candidate for the position that they're seeking.
Yeah, that's correct. So what we do is we do the hiring. So the governor nominates you, but you don't become the clerk until we hire you.
That's correct. It's a job interview. That's a good way to look at it.
And I thank you for thanking the counselors, because a lot of times I go to retirement parties for clerks and judges throughout the state, and they thank everybody, the governor, lieutenant governor, whoever they can think of, but they forget to thank the governor's council when they retire. So I plan on being at your retirement party, whenever that is, God willing, and the creeks don't rise. And I'm going to have a little thing for you, but I'm not going to give it to you unless you thank the council for giving you the job at your retirement party, okay?
Absolutely, Counselor. Thank you.
I think you're going to make a great clerk. Everybody speaks so highly of you, and I can't wait to go to Fitchburg when you're out there. I love Fitchburg. I've had great experiences there, and I think you're going to make a great clerk, and I'm going to vote for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Ferreira.
I think he's on a phone call. Oh, there he is.
No,
Okay.
I'm here right now. Hello, can you hear me now?
We can
Yes.
hear you, Counselor. Please proceed.
Thank you. So I got a call the other day from a lieutenant from the state police who was just totally inspired by your actions as an assistant clerk. Talked about how you give good guidance to the police to make sure that when they apply for warrants and do things that they do them correctly, and you don't just sign off on the warrants, which is great. When I was in my role as a police officer, I relied on clerks to make sure that they were fair and impartial, and that we did it right. And they tell me that you're a teacher to them. So I certainly appreciate your role in that. I've also spoke to attorneys on both sides who say that you've been fair and impartial. You have great temperament. I've done my due diligence on you. I've known you for a while. I've heard nothing but high praise from everyone involved in the system. So you will have my support next week, and thank you for your service to the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Counselor Farrar. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hurley, would you like to ask questions of the nominee?
Yes, thank you. We spoke the other day, and I also did my due diligence up to and including Paul Dolly, the Chief Justice of the District Court. And your ratings are off the chart. I guess superstar was probably the best word to use to describe you. And I just have a couple questions. What's your, you're going to be doing bail as a
When
clerk?
Judge- Yes, if Judge Lecanto or another judge isn't available, that is one of my roles under the statute, yes.
And also have you been doing bail as assistant clerk?
Oh, in terms of a bail commissioner, Counselor?
Yes.
I opted not to do that. We do have one in the Fitchburg District Court who I do assign, but I don't do them myself.
Okay.
But I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. So as someone who is going to be involved in bail issues, what is your philosophy as far as bail is concerned? What tools would you use to determine the appropriate bail for someone?
I would first determine based upon their record. So the first thing you determine is whether or not they appear in court consistently. I would look in their record to determine the number of defaults. But as I stated in my opening statement, I'm also there to keep the community safe. So I would also determine the number of convictions on their record as well, and the severity of those, the charges of those convictions as well, to determine whether or not I should impose a cash bail on them. So I would take into consideration the safety of the community and the public safety, and balancing that with their record of showing up in court. Those are the two most that come to mind.
All right. Thank you. And are you more comfortable with the civil side or the criminal side of the court?
To be honest with you, if I may be so bold in saying, I think I feel equally as comfortable in both. I did practice law for 28 years, and I had a pretty balanced practice.
That's a good answer.
I can tell you my office manager, when I first appeared there, and she said she was just loved it that I knew civil, and if I have a civil matter before me that I can handle as a magistrate, I always make sure there's a rule to support whatever decision I make. And so I think that's why I think and on the criminal side as well, I think I'm equally as strong.
That's a good answer. Thank you. As I indicated, I've checked you out and you passed with flying colors. So I intend to vote for you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Hurley.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ianello, do you have questions for the nominee?
Yes, I do. Just a few. Now, you've been the acting clerk for a little over a year. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's correct, Counselor.
And prior to that, you were an assistant clerk.
Yes.
And I thought I heard a previous witness say that if in fact you are confirmed, there's no assistant clerks at Fitchburg, or did I?
I have had no assistant clerks since February of 2020, when, yes.
Wow. And how many sessions on a regular basis go on in Fitchburg?
We have the main session when jury, now keeping in mind, before COVID, the pandemic, when we still had a jury session, we had a jury session as well, every day, except Friday, but on Fridays, we had our trial assignment days. I have a small claims every Monday at 1. I have show cause hearings and CMBIs every Wednesday. And then, that's not to mention when the state police, Lunenburg Police or Fitchburg Police come into the clerk's office with a search warrant. And then there's applications for criminal complaint. I'm probably telling you more than you asked, Counselor, but so we have main session, jury session, and then, I have my clerk sessions as well.
So what I guess, what I'm confused about, when there's multiple sessions on, there's no assistant clerk in the session?
No, I have a sessions clerk who's part of my staff who sits in the
Okay.
main session.
So there
Yes,
are
and then-
other clerks, but no assistant clerks.
Correct.
Okay. And bail, you've been doing bail hearings, or, people come in 2, 3 in the morning and you set bail, is that correct?
I am not a bail commissioner myself. I opted not to take on that task, but our sessions clerk is also the bail commissioner.
Because many, if I'm right, many assistant clerks are in fact bail commissioners, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
And the reason you didn't undertake that responsibility or role is why?
At the time that I became an assistant clerk, I had my elderly mother living with me. I had my high school daughter at home, and I just didn't think it would really fit into my schedule.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I agree. And Fitchburg, what is most of the business in Fitchburg? If you give me a sense, is it mostly criminal, mostly civil, or just about even?
I think it's mostly criminal, but we do have a robust civil session as well, and civil cases in Fitchburg as well. And keeping in mind, we're the jury court for 4 other courts, Gardner, Winchendon, Clinton, and Leominster. So they feed their cases to us. So that builds on our civil and criminal lists.
Okay, it seems, yeah, I understand. So back to that assistant clerk issue that I mentioned. In the foreseeable future, do you think there'll be at least another assistant clerk in Fitchburg? Have you got any sense on that?
Yes, Chief Justice Dawley indicated that he would allow me, if I'm lucky enough to get this permanent position, 2 assistant clerks. Fitchburg is statutorily allowed 3 assistant clerks along with the clerk magistrate. I wasn't seeking 3 at this time. After doing it alone for a year, 2 will be great.
Okay, that's great. No, I was impressed with your presentation. Your witnesses were great. So next week, when your name comes before the council, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you, Council Ionel. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And Counselor Devaney, would you like to ask questions of the nominee?
Nice to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Thank you for coming the distance to meet with me. I hope that you enjoyed it. It was over 4 hours.
Yeah, it was great.
Yep. I first want to say that Brian DeAndrea was so excited about coming today, and he got a call. One of the clerks was sick, so he wants to tell you that he would have been here. But he called me and he said so many good things about you, that you worked your way. You did it the hard way in the right way, and you earned it. He couldn't say enough about your demeanor, your temperament, your personality, how you treat people, your compassion. And I say it all the time, I look for compassion and empathy. And so I do want to put that on the record. And I'm disappointed that he wasn't here because, I remember fondly when he came before us. So, you are so rounded with all your experience. We don't see this, you know? I mean, you've been in every court. You've been in the district court, the juvenile court, the probate, the SJC, housing, probably missing one. But to me, what a wonderful background you're bringing to the bench for all of the different cases that you have. And you have a balance of criminal and civil. And I just hope that the governor will look and see how qualified someone, 28 years, and you decided to be a clerk magistrate, that we should be looking with people with experience well over 20 years. Because the other younger ones will have their time. But let's give their due, their experience. And so you really are the poster child here today. So I'm very glad you're here. I'm glad you're appointed. You have had such a range of cases that, you know, it's just incredible. So you bring your probate experience, you bring all of that, and that to me is important. And I talked about, you know, something that really concerned me was about removal cases. And we don't have a crystal ball as governor's counselors. We don't know that person's going to change, the robe's going to change that person, or whatever. And one of those people did that. And this was probably about 18, 19 years ago. And I read about one of her cases in the Boston Globe. And there was a couple who had been divorced. And, you know, they had a good relationship to, you know, he used to see the children quite often because he lived very close to where his former wife, and there were 3 little children. And he even would go Christmas and stay overnight so that he'd be there when they got up in the morning. So she decided that she was going to move to Oregon. And she didn't have a person there that she knew. She didn't have a friend or relative. She didn't have a job waiting for her. And this judge allowed her to do that and gave visitation, which I hope they throw that out. No parent, no good parent should visit a child. But anyway, she gave him visitation 6 to 7 on the computer. You can't hug your sons or daughters on a computer. And that always stayed with me all these years. And removal is very concerning to me. And you had a removal case. And I like the result. Tell us about that one.
Certainly. So I've had several, but the one that comes to mind is the one that is in my application. In that case, it was an initial divorce as opposed to a complaint for modification. And the father filed for divorce, the mother filed a counterclaim, and not only did she want custody of the child, but she wanted to remove the child from the state of Massachusetts to her home state of Colorado. And so we had a full, I was involved with the case from the beginning. I think it lasted for more than 7 years post-trial matters as well. But what I found what the theory of the case, in my opinion, needed to be, and I think I was right because it was a successful outcome for my client, was I had to it was important that he showed the court that he was the primary custodial parent of the child. And if he could show that to the judge, which he did, based upon his testimony, which was excellent over the 4 days of trial, he was granted primary custodian of the child. And the mother remained in Colorado until she realized she had to come back because her parenting time, I agree with you, it shouldn't be called visitation, parenting time with the child was going to be limited as a result. So that was the focus, was that he he needed to prove to the judge he was the primary caretaker of that child the first 4 years of her life, and she was only a 4-year-old.
We talked about other removal cases that you had, but that one really resounded when I thought that it was a kidnapping almost, that she just took her child to Florida and there was no court order to allow her to do
That's
that.
correct. That's
And
correct.
I think she was given 2 weeks, right, to go to Colorado, and that's what she did?
Yes, and she went in, she was in Colorado, but the child was here because the judge ordered that she return the child.
Oh, yeah.
And then she was allowed a shared parenting schedule, but she opted to stay in Colorado, and the child went back and forth for more than a year. It was a
Wow.
long time for that 4-year-old.
It's sad. I want to go back to, I ask all the nominees, your journey here, the process. So tell me about that. Tell me how you went before the JNC. And I like to educate people who don't know. The Governor's Council doesn't have an awful lot of authority, okay? It's the JNC, the Judicial Nominating Commission. And there are 21 lawyers who are given the ultimate awesome responsibility to choose who's going to get an interview and who's not, and who they're going to recommend to the governor. And ultimately come before us and we have a hearing. We don't know how many people, we don't even know how many people apply. So I want people to know that, because people think that, you know, we have resumes that we look and say, oh, this one looks good. It's not true. But let me ask you, when you went before the JNC, 21 given that awesome responsibility, how many were there?
I believe 12.
Okay, 12. Well, you hit the jackpot. That's about, in this administration, this JNC has never had 21 lawyers there. That's a disgrace. And I'm not saying it to you. I want people out there to know the procedure here. And I have no control of it. And it's wrong. Because when I think of 9 people who never met a nominee, never saw them, never called them, and is voting for a lifetime position, I mean, that's outrageous. But I wanted to throw that out for people to know. Because years ago, there was a Judicial Nominating Commission chair who said to those 21 lawyers who had that responsibility, if you don't go to the hearing of that nominee, you don't vote on the nominee. That's great. That's open government. So now, after I got that off my chest, now the thing is that you have had every type of case, and I've been here a long time, and I don't see this. I don't see it. And you know, you've had criminal, you have in civil, and you've represented equally men and women and children, representing children. And you know, in this society, and I cry almost every day when I read about mothers who kill their children, and fathers and boyfriends, and torture them, and it just seems to be the norm, you know. And you've had those cases. Okay, let's go back to some of the cases. Now, there was one case, and you defended a woman who was an alcoholic, and the husband wanted custody. That was an amazing case. Tell us about that one.
So in that, yes, in that case, that was an initial divorce. I believe the husband initiated the divorce. The wife called me for representation. We spoke at length, obviously, before our first hearing. And after that first hearing, I had some concerns about her issues with drinking. And after that hearing, we left, and I didn't speak to her about it. But then later that evening, she called me and she came in and admitted that she had a drinking problem. And she was about to, she feared not only that she was going to lose custody of the child, but she was going to lose parenting time altogether with the child, or maybe only have supervised visits. So I was in a position where I needed to represent her diligently and zealously, but at the same time help her to overcome this issue. So I I did some research. We had another hearing shortly after that because the father filed a motion, I believe, to suspend her visits or to limit them, her parenting time. And I presented to the judge that she would be willing both to participate in, pay for a period of time, the SoberLink program, which is basically a at-home breath test that you would take along with going to AA meetings. And she did that, for lack of a better term, I guess enthusiastically, because she did not want to lose the chance that she could lose at least a shared custody arrangement with her child. It was pretty contentious until I came up with that idea. But at the same time, she needed to be willing to do it. But I think she trusted me so much, and I spent time with her to talk to her, that I think we were able to establish that plan, convince the judge to come up with that plan in a temporary order. And after, I'd say 3 to 6 months, we were able to get them amicably divorced with a shared parenting schedule as a result.
And if I recall, you required her to have three times a day.
times a
the
day.
breathalyzer test.
Yes.
Yeah, that was amazing. The other thing is that you told me you've been involved in, because I said to you, what do we do about alcoholics that come before you? We don't hear about that. We know about drugs, but we don't hear. And you told me, and it's new to me, tell us about that program for alcoholics.
Oh, well, it's more for, I think it's in order to divert, it's the diversion program through the DA's office in Worcester County. We have someone, representative of that program come in every Thursday, and it's more up for the younger defendants, first-time offenders, so that they won't appear before us again. And I believe it's an online class with some education on alcohol and drugs. And they take that, I believe, prior to arraignment so that they don't have a record. And so it's more, and it's a great program.
It is.
In order to avoid any type of future.
Well, I wish they
issues.
had that in all the courts. That's in district attorneys. That's really wonderful because I hadn't heard about that. So now we had, let me see, you've had cases that are so involved, unbelievable. Now, I always wonder how you determine the veracity of someone. If they're going to, on a 209A and they're going to accuse, the boyfriend or spouse or girlfriend or whatever, how do you do that? And I thought that criminal case that you had about domestic battery, that was an interesting one about the ex-girlfriend. And, well, I'm not going to tell you, talk about it.
So
Can you
I believe you're
tell-
talking about the Commonwealth versus Williams that I tried before a judge in the Gardner District Court. I represented the father of an infant, and the mother had accused him of a domestic assault and battery. He went there to visit, have parenting time with his young son, and I don't know what caused but they started with a verbal argument, and the police report read, her statement or allegation to the police was that she threw all of his belongings out the window, and he brushed up against her, and that was the assault and battery. Then at the time of the trial, she embellished, for lack of a better term, or added more facts that weren't in the police report. And
Didn't she have two different stories to two
she had
different
different
officers?
stories I cross-examined her on, and then also I had witnessed her out in the hallway before the trial, speaking to my client in a very amicable way, and she had the child with her. So that all came up in cross-examination as well.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, the diverse cases that you've had, there's no surprises for you, the people that come before you, because you've heard it all, Now, what is it? Guardian? I never pronounced that right. Now, you have done that, which representing children, which I really appreciate, because I'm not a fan of the Department of Family and Children, and we need people like you. And there was one, was it Vancouver that comes to mind?
It was a case that I told you about. It's not in my application, but I was the probate and family court appointed me as guardian ad litem for two young children. I think they were ages 2 and 5. It was an initial divorce. Mother filed for divorce and not only was seeking custody, full custody, but she also wanted to leave the state of Massachusetts with the two children and move to her home lands of Vancouver. As you know, if you have primary custody of a child, you have to show in a removal matter that there's a legitimate interest to move there.
Yeah.
But if there's a shared custody, you have to show that it's within the best interest of the children to be removed to another matter. So that's how I had to approach the case, was to determine these children were very young. So it was kind of, it was easier to determine because it's a finite period of time, whether there was a shared custody arrangement or a primary custody arrangement. I had determined that it was shared custody. The father was very involved. I met with him at length, met with his family members. That's part of my job as a guardian ad litem. Met with her, spoke to her parents via Skype. I'm going back 10 years ago via Skype because they were out in Vancouver. And my first initial step was thinking, I think it's primary. I think, I was thinking they have a shared custody arrangement. So now it was for me to determine whether or not it was in the children's best interest to move there. While I was still in the middle of my investigation, summer vacation came and the parties, along with their counsel, agreed that she could take the children to Vancouver to visit on a 2-week vacation to visit with her family. And she did that and she didn't return with the children. So all of a sudden, not that my role became moot, I wrote a report and submitted it, but now there was a different aspect that the attorneys had to deal with, the Hague Convention, getting the children back. But from my understanding, the children were returned and the father now has custody because of that incident.
Well, I know that you support shared parenting, and I know you're not in the probate court, but there are things that come up before you related to that. And I'm a big proponent of shared parenting, and I am a member of Women in Leadership for Shared Parenting. And I think men have not always got the fair deal, and it's changing a little bit. But you certainly have been someone out there for men and women, and I love your background. It's really great. Now, you had, what was that? The older man, an African American, and he was picking up someone at the ER. That was bizarre.
So he was charged with operating under the influence. This is going back many years ago, more than a decade. I think he was doing a favor for a friend, picking them up or dropping them off at the ER, and his somebody, whether it was a nurse, I can't recall, or someone,
Someone from the
bystanders,
hospital.
noticed that he seemed to be under the influence of alcohol. We had a jury trial, but no one could form an opinion as to his actual driving of the vehicle, operation of the vehicle. It was just more at the scene. He had bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, but anyone who saw him drive away there was nothing remarkable about his driving. That's what I think the theory of the case was there.
I've always thought there should be a law that grandparents have a right to see the grandchildren if they're good people. And in this particular case really bothered me when the daughter-in-law didn't like the mother-in-law and she turned her husband against her. And so they were so desperate, the grandparents, that there was an art event at the school, elementary school, and they went, and she objected she went to court, I think, over that because she didn't want them. You can tell it better than
This is
I do.
another case you and I discussed that wasn't in my application, but
Yeah.
the daughter-in-law applied for a harassment order under Mass General Law, Chapter 258E, to preclude her children from seeing my client, who was the paternal grandmother. And we had a full hearing, again, in the Gardner District Court in that matter, and the restraining order, the petition for the harassment order was denied. Again, because she didn't meet the criteria that's needed, which is, it's a pretty steep criteria to meet for harassment orders.
But the sad thing is, you won that, but you didn't win the grandparents to be able to see the children,
No, I advised my client if she wanted me file a grandparent visitation or guardianship or something, and she didn't want to take that route. She just hoped over time that what matters would be resolved.
What was the one that there was a woman who was fighting for child support? I think she was the girlfriend. Do you remember that one? And so she wanted to terminate the child support. And I don't have the number on that one, but anyway, you supported the father and you won that one, but it's all vindictiveness, all of these cases, when you think of it, it's not in the interest of the children.
In some cases, that is the result. Oh, yes, I recall that it was the parent. It's actually a case that's still pending, but I'd had a show cause hearing. I was the clerk on a magistrate's hearing to determine whether or not criminal complaints should issue, and it was two women, and one of them had a harassment order against the other, and the accused was now dating or married to the other woman's former boyfriend or husband, and it was an uttering charge and a forgery charge because she allegedly forged her name on some probate family court documents.
She forged it saying she wanted to terminate
The child support.
How outrageous. Now, I'm going to ask you, what are the most difficult decisions as a clerk magistrate have you seen?
Well, for me personally, the biggest challenge I had to overcome was stop practicing law and start acting as a clerk magistrate. So I had to stop acting as an advocate and be neutral and detached. So when I was first there and I would read something, I had to stop doing that. That's probably been the most challenging. I think I've overcome it now after 2 years, but that was definitely a challenge. I think if you've practiced law and then you go in to be an assistant clerk, I could see that being a learning curve for any practicing attorney.
No, I can imagine that you almost want to assist that person to say, hey, you left this out, but no, that's true. That is. But, so your move after 28 years of being in every court representing all these diverse cases, was it you just got up one day and said, hey, you know what? I'd like to be a clerk magistrate.
It wasn't really, well, it was more, I received a lot of encouragement from colleagues and from people in the trial court. And when positions opened up for assistant clerk positions in central Massachusetts, I applied and was lucky enough to get it. I just thought it was a great time to make that transition, to start to work in the community I grew up in.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm so glad that you did. And, I've been here a long time. I don't know anyone that's been in all these courts in Massachusetts as you have. So I know any case that comes before you, you've had some experience. But, I love what you do representing children and helping that alcoholic woman. Now, I'm sure, if a judge would remove her from ever seeing the child, given that. But you helped her and she overcame it, which is wonderful, So, no, I am, I'm just overwhelmed with all your resume. And as I said, this is what we need. We need someone with experience. We don't want someone learning on the bench. And we get a lot of them. And I get calls about it too. So, I'm going to be looking to see you continuing your success. And I'm so happy that this was your first time was this the first time that you applied?
Yes,
Yeah. Wow. Bingo. You're lucky.
I am.
And you know what? And you didn't give to councils, you didn't give to the administration, no political contributions. How refreshing. Thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet with you, and I wish you continued success. And I'll be looking forward next week to see the council confirming your position.
Thank you so much,
No.
Counselor Devaney.
And thank you for all your time. I really enjoyed it. I really did. What a history you have. It's a great background to bring you here. And I love what your father said about you don't have to speak English to do the job. Yeah, it's true. No, I know that discrimination. My family went through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Devaney.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Kennedy.
Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you so much, Counselor.
Just a couple of questions. I have known you for a while, and how about you? Council Devaney offered first, as she did today, the fact that we don't have a crystal ball, can't see how someone's going to do a job. We don't need one with you because you've been doing it for a year, and you've been doing it under circumstances that most people would quit. I don't have any assistant clerks, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and you're juggling everything yourself, and get through that and still want it. You deserve it. Let me ask you this, just touching on what Councilor Iannello spoke of, that you mentioned in your statement initially. How often do you turn the police down on search warrants?
I don't have a number in my head. I've done it. I've done it, and
Most clerks don't, you know.
I've say to them, can you go speak to the DA's office about this, please?
You tell them to go fix it. Sometimes they're missing something, they're missing basis of knowledge or reliability or whatever, with dealing with an informant.
Yeah, I'm neutral and detached, and I keep that in my mind.
My experience is that most clerks educate the police on, it's not so much that the facts of the case might not warrant the search warrant, but sometimes it's poorly drafted because they just rush it through. And my experience is most clerks just give them what they want when they show up at the counter. Which is good for me, by the way, because it gives me something to work with. Makes Judge Lecanto have to work harder later, but.
No, I'm completely neutral and detached, and I think at first I was a little timid to tell him I can't, I can't do this. But now I think they appreciate it, and I think we have a mutual respect over it, and I think they've become, and maybe this is to a disadvantage to defense. I think they've become better at search warrants as a result of it.
Right.
Over time, but this job is way too important to rubber stamp anything.
We don't like that word around here.
No, I know, and I can.
That's pretty difficult without any assistant clerk magistrates. How did that come about? I mean, you when you went in there, did you have there's 3 openings. At some point, there were 4 of them. How did we go from 4 to 0?
Well, you keep confirming applicants. That's
well, you had Judge Malone.
Judge Malone was the one who hired me.
And by the way, he called me last night about.
Okay, I hope that was a good thing. Yes.
It was, yes.
And then Brian DeAndre was the acting clerk in Fitchburg.
He called me as well yesterday.
I hope that was a good thing as well.
Yeah.
And he became the clerk as you know, of the Worcester District Court, an awesome responsibility. And Brendan Moran, who I believe is up next, was the other assistant clerk.
Yeah, he said he called me, but he was worried about himself.
He was worried about himself, yes. And he has been the acting clerk in the juvenile court that the Chief Justice Amy Nectum gave him that opportunity a few years ago. And so that just left me.
And your slot is really an assistant. Were you the first assistant?
No, Brian DeAndre had been the first assistant.
So everybody left and your slot opened up. It couldn't be filled because you became the acting clerk.
That's correct. And I can't hire anyone, which.
Did they give you any help? They send over Carmine or anybody over to help you out once in a while?
The Clinton District Court has been so generous, the Leominster District Court. I didn't call Westboro only because I had plenty of coverage between Mr. Tomiolo's court and Mr. Salmon's court.
Yeah, Carmine called me about you as well.
I worked with Carmine when Mr. Malone or Judge Malone now was the acting clerk in Westboro. I learned a lot from Mr. Simonelli as well. He's great. It was great.
I couldn't find anybody to say anything bad. I tried. but I couldn't. It
He
was
didn't
just-
call anyone in my
and-
immediate family.
And I got a lot of, when I was talking to various people in different courts, mostly moving cases around, which is all we do these days. When you talk to the clerks when you're doing that. And every single one of them mentioned you that I've spoken to since your nomination. Oh, she's terrific. She's great. So, no, we don't have a crystal ball, but we don't need one in this case, Councilor Devaney, because she's been doing the job and doing a fantastic job. She's going to keep doing that. I'll be voting for you next week.
Thank you, Counselor Kennedy.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Duff.
Unmute myself. Good morning. It's nice to see you.
Great to see you,
Um,
Counselor Duff.
My pleasure. First of all, thank you for applying. You've shared so much of your story and your journey with us. I appreciate it. I'd like to know, can you share with us some of your thoughts of some of the major changes you've seen over the last 10 or 20 years being in the court system?
Well, certainly the technology, but on a more personal level, I think when I first started practicing law in the early 1991, 1992, I think I may have been the only female bar advocate in the Leominster District Court. That rapidly changed, I'd say, within the last 10 years. Even like just the clerk magistrates throughout, I can only speak for Central Massachusetts because I know it so well. You know, there's more women in those roles now than there were when I was practicing. Fitchburg had primarily men. There may have been one female assistant clerk, Leominster, Gardner. So I think that's been a great change. I think if I could be so bold to say is that there's more prominence in women and I shouldn't say only as attorneys. I'm just thinking the probation department, our chief of security is a female. I think the security department, facilities, every aspect of the trial court, more female judges certainly as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What you just touched on at the end, Attorney, is that it's not just the judges and the clerk magistrates, but there are a lot of other people who work in the court system who are very important. And I personally think that diversity is something that we really need to strive for. We don't want folks, their first experience in a court to be filled with people that don't look like them, because it's a scary experience to start with for many. And it should be as, as familiar or comforting or whatever as we can possibly make it. And on that note, how about diversity? Do you think there's more awareness? Has there been more training? I'm a champion of the underdog. I care, of course, about all my constituents, but there are particular communities which are at greater risk. You've touched on some of them as children, but disabled people, physically disabled, mentally disabled people, LGBTQ people, even elderly at times can be at a great disadvantage going into a court. So do you have anything you can share with us about that and perhaps strides or places that we can improve?
Yes, certainly. Well, so the Fitchburg District Court, I think the community brings a lot of diversity, particularly the city of Fitchburg. And I think our court in particular, our staff brings both the clerks, all the staff, every staff, facilities, security, this clerk's office, the probation department. They bring a lot of diversity to the court. We have a lot of Hispanic and people of color who work for us, who I think help us to maintain empathy for those who come before us. We have a lot of bilingual people who come in. Certainly, there's always room to grow because I do think that we do have some inherent biases. And I think one way to overcome that is to hire more people who will bring diversity to the trial court. you know, I'm giving you, just as an example, we're doing some renovations, Counselor Duff, around the exterior of the Fitchburg District Court. We're putting in a new disabled ramp. The one we have was like a labyrinth to get up for people who needed to use that if they're in a wheelchair. We do have an attorney, a local attorney who is confined to a wheelchair who appears before us often. And while they improved upon the ramp, facilities didn't take into consideration part of the sidewalk that the first justice and I pointed out to them, because the ramp feeds off of the parking lot, and we made facilities aware that this particular attorney may not be parking that parking lot because he's close by or maybe parking on the street. So we needed a certain area of the sidewalk repaired and smoothed out without a lip to it so he could gain access. That might be a small example, but I think it's a good example of I think how aware we are in the Fitchburg District Court of some people who don't have the same opportunities or frankly, the luxuries that we have, that some of the other people have there. So
Thank you
just
for
one
sharing that.
example.
I actually think that's a great example. What most folks don't understand is at some time in our life, about 90% of us will be considered disabled or differently abled. And that could be our mobility, that we might be in a chair or not able to get around as easily. It may be our sight. As we know, I didn't wear glasses when I was younger. It could be our hearing. It could be many, many things. And it's when we speak of these communities, we need to look at them as inclusive, because they are us. They are all of us. And I applaud you for even mentioning that, because I don't think we are quite where we need to be yet on this type of inclusiveness. However, just the awareness in these conversations really matter, because folks don't always think, they always think, oh, that won't be me. Well, the truth is it's going to be, most of us end up with some differentness of us as we age than we had when we were younger. And they manifest themselves in ways that one would never know. So I think that is really terrific. Over the course of COVID, we've seen so many changes, not just in society, but in our courts. Are there any lessons that you would like to share with us that came from this time that you think maybe we can carry over that would be helpful to us?
Well, I can think of two things, and they're a little intertwined. I think as a court, for the Fitchburg District Court, I think we've turned from, during COVID, we've gone from being staff members, employees, to teammates, and now to family because of that. Because we're actually trying to keep each other healthy. We're worried about each other's health and making sure people don't get ill. And I think we've become closer also because of the advancements in technology as well, because now we're really working together, saying, how can we keep business going, making sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard, at the same time, keep the community safe. And how do we do that when the courts are limited in who can come in and who can't come in, especially when we need to be at 50%, 75% staff,
Right.
but still maintain the same caseload, which we've been doing in the Fitchburg District Court. So I think the communication that I have with the first justice, with the chief probation officer, with the head of security, with the head of facilities, my office manager, I think we've been able to meet every day, because every day is different. And we have to say, okay, how do we work today? And we've gone from being completely closed to back in March of 2020 to doing as much business as we could over the telephone, then to Polycom, then to finally video conferencing with Zoom. That now we've plugged in FTR for the record onto Zoom for better quality recording. And having more than one Zoom line for different hearings. And so I think that's what we've learned the most, because I don't think we would have been able to accomplish that at the Fitchburg District Court if we didn't all have respect for each other, realize that everyone has a role to play, and we all need each other to get to where we are today with technology and with serving the public.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes to
No,
mind.
it does, and we're hearing this over and over again as you know what we've gone through collectively as a world, a country, as a commonwealth has been challenging and many times tragic in people's lives. But one of the things we've come out of it with stronger is being able to use our technology as we are today. You know, there is absolutely no reason for us not to employ technology. There is no reason to think that if somebody is on a conference call with you or interviewing you on a Zoom or WebEx or whatever, that it's not the same. Some people might feel that they personally want to, you know, they feel for whatever reason they want to be in person, but there's no reason, you know, those of us who've done business internationally for years, this is how business has always been done, you know, for 20, 30 years. And it's nice to see, you know, some of our government catching up on it and employing it to be more transparent and to be, you know, just better run. It's a very good best practice. And I'm pleased to hear that, because I think there are some people that don't really understand what it is, and that just because you're not in a room with somebody, like I am not in the room with you right now, doesn't mean that I'm not getting a good sense of you. Someone may personally feel that they can't get it, but they shouldn't impose their own personal feelings on others. You know, we have so many, as some of us serve on boards of directors for different nonprofits and things, we have to meet virtually because we are from all over the place. And we do our work and we do it well. And sometimes we even do it better. Sometimes we can do more work. You know, contrary to what one of my colleagues feels, I think that's what this SJC has done. I think they have employed technology in a very different way than others have done. And it is this administration's call to do that. And it has been very successful. There haven't seemed to be any big glitches from it. People may not all agree or like it, but that doesn't mean it isn't good and doesn't work. So, but I'm glad to hear that application to your day-to-day work has been helpful. I will end on this. I think you're a terrific candidate. You've been doing the job. You're dedicated to the job. There've been many people who've reached out and said how well qualified you are. Thank you for your public service, to be frank. You probably could have a cushier life if you were out in private practice making a heck of a lot more dough. But as a citizen of the Commonwealth, I salute you and I thank you for your service. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Duff.
Thank you, Councilor Duff.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilor Hurley.
Yes, I was remiss. One of the things I wanted to say was you working with Judge Lecanto is probably one of the best things that could have happened to you. I served with him on the district court. Please give him my regards and tell him I miss him. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
He just heard you, Councilor Hurley. He heard you.
Thank you, Councilor Hurley. Attorney Vittorioso.
Yes, Councilor DePalo.
Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
Obviously, we've heard a lot about your experience, and you and I had a couple opportunities to talk leading into this. So I'd just like to ask a couple questions to get a little further into your perspective, because that's ultimately what you'll bring in your discretion. So I appreciated Councilor Duff's comments, especially around the percentage of women on the bench, because that's been on the uptick, which is a credit to this administration. And one thing I've noticed of folks who've come before us in my time on the council is that everyone has a mentor. Everyone has folks who took them under their wing and encouraged them to make it to where they are. And I think that's been a big factor in the increase of women on the bench. But there are other concerns. Do you know how many Black or Latino judges there are or clerks in Central Mass?
I don't, in terms of clerks in central Massachusetts, for clerk magistrates, I don't think there are any. Assistant clerks, I don't think there are, maybe in the Worcester District Court, they have several. I don't know, but the smaller ones, I don't think that there are any or few. In terms of judges in central Mass, at least for Region 5, I know in terms of women, I think there's less than a handful. And I don't think there are many, and I'm remiss if I'm missing one or two, but I can't think of any off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I think your assessment is accurate. And I wonder if clerks and judges taking positions today, whether they could prioritize, and I'm guessing asking you whether you would prioritize mentoring, especially women and attorneys of color, to think about themselves in these roles and apply to these roles so that they can potentially fill these seats.
Certainly, I would do that. And this is maybe a little bit far removed because they're not attorneys yet, but we do have an intern program with Fitchburg State University.
Mhm.
While we can't recruit who's coming, the head of the professor who's the head of the program sends them to us, but we do have students who bring diversity to the court. My current intern now, he can't come in the building, but he's been Zooming in and watching. But I know he's of Hispanic descent, local, and he has a great interest in the criminal justice system. That's just one example, but I certainly would do that for younger attorneys, especially if they become bar advocates in the Fitchburg District Court or any district court frequently. I think that would be a great idea, actually.
I appreciate that. And tangential, but your comment made me think of it. Am I correct that you served or do serve on the Fitchburg State Board? Is that?
I was on the
Did I get
Fitchburg
that?
State University Board of Trustees from 2009 to 2015, I think, 2007 to
Okay.
2015.
And I bring it up just because it's another example of your involvement in the community that I don't think was mentioned today.
Yeah.
Thanks. One thing we talked about, and it's related to what I just asked, is what we know about racial disparities in our criminal system in Massachusetts. And we have a justice system that I think we rightly can be proud of. But we've seen and we know that there's room for improvement, especially around racial disparities. So I guess I'll just throw out to you what your takeaways and reactions were reading the so-called Harvard study.
Well, my review of the Harvard study, and I know that was led by the late, great Chief Justice Gantz, and I give him a lot of credit for that, but I agreed with it 100%. I think it's accurate. I think, while I'd like to think the Fitchburg District Court, its staff, its first justice, the clerk, the chief probation officer, I'd like to think we treat everyone the same, but I'm certain that there's an innate bias or maybe suppressed bias, for lack of any other better term, that may exist, within the community and the way people are treated. I think the best way to address it is with education. Right now, we've been getting more than ever, and I don't know if it's because of COVID and we've been in the e-learning center, the trial court e-learning center has been offering an abundance of courses, probably more so in the past, and a lot of them deal with, diversity in the court, racial bias, how to handle that. So I think if we have more of that online training, and then maybe eventually in-person training, if we can get back to that, I think that will make a big difference. And I think another advantage would be for the trial court, and they're very good about this, and I think we at Fitchburg District Court are very good about this, are hiring, we should hire more people who would bring diversity to the court, which would then in turn abate any of that innate bias because, you know, because there'd be that much more diversity in the trial court system.
Expand the pool of the perspective.
Exactly.
To coin a horrible phrase. And I like what you said, because none of us want to think that we're the ones harboring the implicit bias that lead to these outcomes, right? District Attorney Joe Early, I think, does a great job, especially in the diversion of youth, which we talked about during this hearing. I guess what I'm concerned about is making sure that this moment of addressing implicit bias and being cognizant of these racial disparities like lasts beyond the moment, you know, as the issue of the moment, the next issue is going to come up eventually, right? So it's really important to me, since, you know, implicit bias is like an evolutionary trait that we have, that we continue having that be a part of the discussion. And I'm wondering if as clerk, you would ensure that that continues to be part of the discussion.
I certainly would ensure that it continues and that we don't talk about it just today because of the issues that have happened in 2020. And then, you know, then we're off to the next issue. And I think it's impossible for us to do that because our role as trial court leaders is to serve the community. Whether it's to give people an opportunity to be heard or to maintain safety in our community. And I think it will always be there and be prevalent, and in terms of us being aware of it. And I certainly, and I know I can speak on behalf of our first justice and our chief probation officer, that it's an ongoing concern.
Mm-hmm. And to put a point on it, in that study, it seems that the disparities really start at the charging phase and ultimately trickle into sentencing. As an example, for Black and Latino folks are more likely to be charged with higher offenses from the get-go. If they are charged, if they face charges with dual jurisdiction between district and superior, they're twice as likely to go to superior. We also talked about this and in your discretion in show cause hearings, right? And that came up a little bit today, but I wonder if you could just comment.
So during my show cause hearings, whether they're in person or via Zoom, I treat everybody the same. I look at the charge. I listen to the statement of facts, and I always keep in my mind the definition of probable cause, which frankly, I memorized it, even though like, you know what it is, but you need, I just simply memorized it. Whether there's reasonably trustworthy facts to warrant a prudent person to determine whether a crime has been committed and whether the accused is the perpetrator of that crime. It's the first thing on my mind. But and I treat everyone the same, but if there's a person of color who's before me and they may be charged with duplicative crimes that I may see that I may not see on someone who doesn't bring diversity to the system, you know, it's a concern of mine. So that's why I'm very cognizant of the charges. And going back to rubber stamping, talking about search warrants, I make certain that there's probable cause on cases that where probable cause or charges on which probable cause are due. So if they're charged with possession with intent to distribute and then also charged with possession, and there aren't really two separate incidents or two separate drugs, mm-hmm. I'm not going to issue both complaints and both charges for the sake of doing that. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I guess my point is I fall back on the law first, and I try to treat everybody the same who appears before me.
No, I appreciate that. And your last example of possession versus intent or coupled with intent to distribute is a good one. And I also appreciate what you said about the things you take into account because as I'm sure you know, it's Black and Latino boys especially who end up in our juvenile system. And whether or not a record follows them, once they're there, we know that they're far more likely to end up before you, perhaps facing charges.
Right.
And again, speaking to your perspective, I wonder how you feel about raising the age of juvenile jurisdiction and why you feel that way.
I had this conversation with the esteemed Counselor Devaney, and I know she respects my decision. I respect hers and I understand it, but I do.
We all
feel-
respect each other, to be sure, to be sure.
She makes valid points, but I honestly think it should be increased to what? I don't know, maybe 21. I mean, my reasoning behind it is, I think there's a bigger, trying to word this correct, I think there's a bigger gap between maturity when you go from 17 to 18 than if you go from 20 to 21. It's when you get a little bit older, the gap of maturity, I think, is narrower. And the example I give is when I have an application for a criminal complaint and someone turned 18 a couple weeks earlier, and I'm like, oh, now they're charged with like, it could be as simple as operating after suspension. I don't know, or more egregious as assault and battery. And I'm thinking 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, they were 17 and would be in juvenile court. Now all of a sudden, they're faced with a district court penalty that may not benefit them in the long run, as opposed to if they were a little bit older, or as opposed to if they were still in the juvenile court.
Tangential to that, but it just jumped in my head. I think about things I saw as an undergraduate in my small liberal arts school, and I think about what folks who weren't in college in other neighborhoods were doing, and how the two groups faced very different consequences, if any consequences at all,
Yes.
for the same exact
Yes,
behavior.
that's a very good example. I know exactly what you mean.
And then the last question I have for you around access to justice, and Counselor Duff really hit on a lot of the important points, but and if I may have missed it, but around language barriers and folks feeling comfortable in the court and ensuring that folks know what's going on, because, as we know, but sometimes takes for granted as attorneys, folks come in intimidated by the court system. They're scared to be there. It's probably one of the most traumatic days of their lives in some cases. So I'm wondering how sensitive you are to language barriers and going out of your way to ensure that folks feel comfortable in the courtroom.
Well, I think me most of all I'm very sensitive to language barriers, as I've indicated in my opening remarks, with my parents both coming from
È vero.
Italy.
Sì.
Yes, è vero. And so we always ensure the first thing I'll say is my staff in the clerk's office, we have at least 2 who are bilingual, and I know more so in the probation department. So and also in our security office as well. So we always have someone, in case there's not a professional interpreter available. We have staff who'll be able to interpret for the individuals who appear before us. We always make certain, I may be speaking the obvious, we always make certain we have a Spanish interpreter or any Portuguese interpreter, whatever language it is. We write it on the side in bold, in red print on the side of the file, that if they need an interpreter, and it's also on the docket itself. And even, one of the advantages of Zoom is now we always have a Spanish interpreter on the screen instead of having them to wait to drive from Leominster to Fitchburg or from Gardner and wait for them to come. So these people who need, whether they're defendants, accused, petitioners on restraining orders or on civil matters, they won't have to wait all day like they used to, which turned out to be an disadvantage to them, which I was kind of sensitive to. It's like they don't speak the language, and now they're here longer than someone who does. It doesn't seem fair. So we have we have those interpreters now available, always on the screen. For them. But we're very aware, and we'll often ask people if they need an interpreter, just to be certain, if in case we didn't know in advance as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, I've heard that about Zoom, and perhaps that's one of the good things that's going to come out of our COVID experience. And I'm always reminded of a client I once had who spoke a particular dialect of Arabic. So the translator we had was not adequate.
Right.
And we didn't necessarily know until things were really moving that there were pieces of communication that were being missed. So I appreciate your sensitivity to that. Well, as I told you, in my relatively short time on the council, I received more calls on behalf of your nomination than any other. And I guess what's helpful for you about that is from some folks who I have a very high regard for. So with that, I have no further questions. I congratulate you again on your nomination. I will be glad to put forward your name to the council at our April 21st assembly.
Thank you so much, Councilor DePalo.
Thank you. And with that, this hearing is closed.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all to all the councilors.
What time does the other one start?
11:30.
Thank you.